Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to the Dynamic User Forms. In this video, I'm going to show you how to take this incredibly simple user form with VBA and automatically customize it to any type of table you want with a single macro and a single form. That's going to be with any sheet, any table, and include all different types of subtables as well. It's going to be an incredible training. I cannot wait to share it with you. So let's get started. Alright, thanks so much for joining me. Just as the title said, Dynamic User Forms. Today I've got a really incredible training. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this user form, basic in its sense, just as you see it here. VBA is going to take on the rest. VBA will automatically create that user form and make it fully editable and customizable, and you're going to be able to save any data and changes in there simply with a one click. It's automatically going to be just that simple. Not only that, it's going to be able to use for any single table. You'll use the same macro, the same form for any table you want. It's fully customizable to be able to handle pictures. We're going to do it all from you every step of the way with you right here. So I got a lot to show you. Now, if this looks a little bit familiar, just a few weeks ago, we created the one-click invoice pop-up here. This quick view here was really cool. We did it with the same data table, and this allowed us to use shapes, and it was really cool. It basically was one directional, meaning you could view the data, but you couldn't change any of the data there. And I thought, well, why don't we do this in a user form sense? So that's just what we're going to do today. We're going to take that same data, but now we're going to make it into a user form. We're going to be able to edit it, change any field we want, tab through just as we use any field. And we're going to be able to also view customer invoices and save any changes we want to that data with just a click. And that one single view here is going to be able to be used in any type of form. It'll be fully customizable. That means if you want to change the row limits, maybe you want 6 rows available, it's automatically going to be able to change just like that. You can also change different things such as font and things. We're going to get into that if we want to do that. And also we've got a whole lot more. So notice now we have 6 rows of data here. So fully customizable form. We'll also be able to customize a background picture onto that form. If I were to change it to this darker blue background form, it would automatically change within that. So we'd now see that darker blue background. Really, really cool custom user form that we're going to be able to share with you today. So I'm really happy to share that with you. There's so much I want to bring you today. So we're going to get started right away. If you do like these trainings, I hope you'll stay with us for each and every one as we bring these to you every Tuesday. Absolutely free. In fact, you can download this workbook using the links down in the description, either with your email or with Facebook Messenger. Of course, if you'd like to support us, I always appreciate that. So many ways to do that. One of the ways is to grab yourself one of our 200 pack of workbooks. That's 200 of my best templates available for just $77. I'll include the link down below, and that's going to have some great templates too, and you can get started on that right away. Also, another way is our Patreon platform. I take these applications each and every week, and I update them based on any features you might want to request or any fixes that you have, or maybe you want me to focus on a certain area. I do that all on Patreon, along with downloadable PDF code books, which help you sort through the code and organize the code in these workbooks. Also, I have early bird specials, downloadable videos, and a whole lot there on our Patreon. So I hope you'll join us there. Okay, great. Let's get started on this training. So basically what we want to do is I want to have a single, very basic user form. I want to create this user form dynamically through VBA so that it's customizable based on the data that we selected. So this row will capture all of the data inside here, including the pictures, and I want to place them accordingly. If we decide we want to show customer invoice tables, then I want to show that. If we decide we're not, we're going to remove it, and then only the customer information will show up. So how do we do that? So I'll show you a few ways to do that. Okay, so some of this, if you saw one of the videos earlier, that quick click up, some of this is very, very familiar. Basically, we have a list of worksheets, so we're not going to go over too much of this setup screen. I've got a list of worksheets. This has been changed. We've got the background picture. We can browse for the background picture of our form, make sure that that's a JPG. So that way, this browse, right, we only want JPG GIFs. I don't want PNG pictures there. Okay. We also have our row limit. In other words, row limit is how many fields do we want, how many rows in a single column. So if I put this to 20, right, a very, very high number, and then I decide to click in here, that means all of my fields are going to be in a single column, right? All of them here are going to be there. So, but how if I want 2 or something, I can do that. So let's say we set this back to 5, something more reasonable, and then we're going to get, we've got 10 fields, so we'll get about 2 columns, and that's what we want. Okay, so we have that. That's fully customizable. If I want the font size, I think I need to set this. The font size, I'm going to put that in a variable here because I didn't set that up. I want to do that live time with you. So we'll call this font size. Okay, we'll create a named range for that, and then we're going to create that. And then, all right, so what I want to do now is I want to also say, okay, so for different sheets, we've got a listing of different sheets. We've got the header row. I want to know where the headers are located on row 2 here in this case, or in this one, row 2 here, invoice item. So we've got the header row in this row 2. And I also want to know the start column, right? If let's say I decide on these customers here, I don't want to include that customer ID. So if I decide I want to start it off in column 2, so maybe I want to do that. So once we do that, ID is going to be excluded. It's going to start. Notice it started with customer now. So it starts, so we can include or exclude the data that we have, right? So that's a really nice feature that we can do that. We may not want to do that. So we also want to know the end column number. What is the last column number of the data that we want? We're going to use 10 for our customers and invoices. Is there a picture? And that means in this case, there is a picture, right? If we take a look at our customers here, our last column, column 10, contains a picture. So if it's a picture, I need to make sure that we notify VBA that this column is a picture so that we can then differentiate the code based on that because it is a different field type, right? It's not a text field. It is now a picture field. So we want to say, yes, this is a picture, and we have a list of all of our headers based on that, and there's a picture here. If it is, where are those pictures located, right? What folder are those pictures? I have those pictures right here, located here inside this field. And so all the pictures are located in this. So we want to make sure we put the location, the file path of that picture, and I want to place that directly inside here. Also, are we going to link a table? If we're going to link a table, in other words, our customers, we have another table. Well, I want to link our customers to invoices, so I'm going to put invoices here. And now, what is that linked ID? In other words, what is it that is going to link our customer sheet to our invoices sheet? So if we take a look here, we have our customers here, but we have a customer ID here. In our invoices, we also have a customer ID. So that is our linked ID. So that's what we need to want to link the two up. So inside our setup screen, we just make sure to put in that is that customer ID. Whereas in our invoices sheet, right, if our invoices are here, we have an invoice ID. And then we have specific items that belong in each invoice. What is that linked ID? That linked ID is the invoice ID. That way, when I select on a specific invoice and I click the mail, I want to show all the invoice items that are on that specific invoice here. So that is that invoice number, that's that linked ID. So we understand that, so we want to do that, and I've done that just for each of the tables. Now there's some information here. Basically, these are the sheet headers, and this allows us to have drop-down list of all the customer fields, drop-down list of all the invoices, or drop-down list of the invoice items. Notice that we have those drop-down lists. When we put them here, we want to know which fields are which, right? So here, I need a drop-down list of all the fields here, customer. So that drop-down list has to come from somewhere, and it's coming from here. So all of this is basically allows us to set up. Now, if you want a little bit more detail on how this is, inside our one-click form there that we did a few weeks ago, I've created more detail, but this time I really want to focus on that particular user form that we get, that editable user form that we can now edit records on it. Now, another reason why would you want to do that? If you can make changes here, why would you want a user form? And there's a great reason why. When you release these applications or you send them to your clients, your customers, your coworkers, right, you may not want them to change this data. You may only want to change it through a user form, because when they change it for user form, one, you can make sure that they don't clear any rows out, right? If we decide to delete customer and they try to save it, you can say, hey, you make sure the customer name is open. So that way they cannot change the original data. Everything happens through a lens of that VBA. It is VBA that checks the validity of your data, or checks that the dates are accurate, or it checks everything before it actually saves it to the VBA. So you've got a really great why you would want to do this. So then what you do is you simply protect all of this data. You allow them to make selection changes, but you don't allow them to make changes. You protect this sheet so they cannot make any changes to this data unless they go through this. Then when they click save, you run all of your checks to make sure that the data is accurate, that everything is accurate, and then you can then simply offer that to them. Now maybe inside our Patreon, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little browse button here so we can update the picture. I think I'll do that. So that would be a nice feature. I'll put that on Patreon so that we can actually change the picture. Notice it's just a static picture. We can't actually make those changes. So maybe I'm going to add that in. All right, so we have that here, and we're going to be able to do that. So we understand why it's important for us to separate the original data from the end users so that we can protect them and keep that data integrity intact. Okay, so we have that. So how do we go about doing that? Well, the first thing what we want to do, and also notice something on a user form, one of the reasons I often don't use user forms is simply because I want to control the placement of that user form, and it is tricky. And notice that the placement of this user form is always exactly on the first column, and it is always exactly on the row below, and that's really important. It was important for me because I want to do that. So regardless of it, so I was able to actually locate some code, and I'll share the link with you, that's going to help us place that. So I was not smart enough to figure out. That's pretty tricky, quite tricky, because it's based on every screen is different. So, but I was able to find a little bit of code that helped me, and I include the link for that. All right, so that's one of the reasons. So now we can use Userforms and we can place them wherever we want to. Very, very helpful. Also, continuing on, so we have the user form. So all we need to do is basically start out with a basic user form. In fact, we probably don't even need this header here, but we have it here available to us. In other words, we could add VBA, but I wanted to start out our user form with 3 components. That's all we have. We have a title, we have a save button here, and we have a cancel. The size of this form means nothing. Okay, it doesn't mean anything. It is VBA that will make the form size dynamic, so we don't have to worry about that. So all we have to do, so we just have some code that we're going to help us do that. So we're going to get into the code now. But the first thing we do with that code is when we select it, notice we've got this little pencil icon. It is when we click this pencil icon that it launches the macro. So the first thing we want to do is on selection change is display that pencil icon. So we have here, now notice the name of this icon, and it's on each sheet, is called edit button, and I have the same one on whether it's invoices or customers. It is the same one called edit button. It is this edit button that I want to display in the first column of the selected row. So how do we do that? Well, that's based on selection change. Going into VBA, Alt F11's shortcut will get you there. And we have just a little bit of on-sheet code here. The first thing I want to do is when somebody deactivates the worksheet or when they activate another worksheet, I just want to hide that edit button. What that does is it forces them to select another row when they come back. So that's kind of important. So it's really simple. So in the same code that we're going to use pretty much for any sheet, if your columns go greater than Z, right? If you have larger columns, you want to increase this, but A3 to A99, and we want to make sure that A contains a value, right? If there's no value, certainly we don't want anything to happen. So if we scroll down here, certainly we don't want anything to happen. Only when we have A containing a value do we want something to happen. So once we have that, then what we're going to do is first thing is I want to take whatever row that they've selected and I want to put it in the setup E5. And what that's going to do is trigger some conditional formatting. So first we're going to take that row and put it directly inside E5 here. Next up, I want to trigger conditional formatting, trigger that. So if we look in the conditional formatting and manage rules, basically the rule here is edit if the setup E5 equals the row. We're going to give it that dark blue and white bold font. Relatively simple here. So that's going to trigger the conditional formatting. Next up, what we're going to do is run this macro show edit icon. This macro is located in our quick view. Actually, it should be save data quick view form. We're going to call it quick view form. Probably should call it dynamic, but basically it's a quick view form. And what we're going to do is we're going to run this macro called show edit. All we're going to be doing is with the active sheet, notice that we can display this on any sheet. It is this same macro that can work on any sheet, and therefore we're using active sheet. And shapes edit button, make sure the name of your edit button is the same. I'm going to place the left position at 1. I want that in the first position right, of our sheet. So we're going to put it all the way on the left. And the top is going to be the active cell top. And then visible equals true. Basically, we're going to show that icon. That's all we have to do. I've assigned a macro to that icon, and it is this macro called Quick View Form Show. So we only have 3 macros that we're going to be focusing on today, really 3 essential macros. One is going to be showing this. We've already gone over that. One is going to be not showing that form and building that form, and the other is going to be saving the data in that form. That is it. Relatively easy training, but we're going to go into detail of that. Okay, so on this macro, the macro that we're going to focus on, we have some private declare functions here. Now, this is part of the code that I did get on this website, and I'll go over this website right here. Basically, I found some code here, right, that we're going to actually place it, and it is located right here. In this form here, this Stack Overflow, this is going to help us position. So it's like 3 or 4 lines of code that I pulled up. It helps us position that form. Very, very important. So private declare, we're going to get the DC in the library. Basically, this is going to get us some user information because it's based on that user screen settings. Every user screen settings are different, all right? Different dimensions, different pixels, different things. So what we want to do is make sure to get the user information. So we're going to do that along with the device caps, right? This is going to get us that device information. It's very specific to their own device because it is that positioning that's going to help us. The reason we have to do that is because when we use user forms are always positioned based on the screen, right? It's either the center of the screen or the top or the left or the bottom, whether it's minimized or maximized. So what we want to do is really we want to focus, we want to start when we're positioning, it's based on that user screen settings, whether it's minimized and things like that. And so this was the easiest code that I could find that could help us to do just that. And it works really great. I was really happy with that. Okay, but this is going to help us get that, all right? And so continuing on, so we'll come back to this. Just keep that in mind that we've gotten those functions here. Now, so this, we need to define the sheet name. I want to know the current sheet name. I want to know the back picture, right? That back picture is a string. If it's a picture field is a string. The picture name of that picture we're going to be using, what folder that's located in, and then the full path of that picture. I also want to know what the linked sheet is, right? That linked sheet, if it's customers, our linked sheet could be invoices. If we're on invoices, our linked sheet could be invoice items. So that linked sheet is going to be found up right here. There's linked tables here. This is our linked sheet. So we're going to need that inside a variable as well. Okay, also what I want to do is I want to know the linked ID. Remember the customer ID or the invoice ID? What is that ID? And I want to know the column widths. We're going to be running the column widths, right? I need to know that. And I'll explain what the column widths are going to be for. The X position, this is going to help us with the position of our form as far as the horizontal. The vertical position, we're going to use those as double. That's going to help us with the form positioning. Next up, we have the text field, right? I want you to be creating multiple fields, right? We're going to be creating text, labels, images, and a list box. So there's 4 different fields that we're going to be typing in our user form. Here in our user form, we have here our labels, which are these labels here, customer, phone, emails. Those are labels. We have our text fields, so these are the actual fields that we're going to be changing. We have our picture field here, and then we have our list box here. So there's 4 different types of fields that we need to create. So we need to define those, right, inside our dimensions, and they're going to be their MS forms, text box, label, image, or list box. And then what I need to do is I'm going to loop through all the forms. Each time we create those fields, just like we do inside shapes in a sheet, each time we create them, I actually have to delete them, right? Otherwise, they're going to be duplicated. Every time I create them, they're going to be right on top of each other, and we're going to be creating duplicates and triplicates and all of that. So the first thing we want to do, just like we do shapes on a sheet when we're sketching, we need to delete. Basically, I'm deleting everything other than the title and these 2 buttons. I'm going to delete everything else. So we're going to need to loop through our form to do that. We're going to use this dim control to do just that. All right, so then what we're going to be doing, we're going to be using a lot of positioning, right? So we need the top position as a long variable because I'm going to need to, that top position is going to be changed as we move down, or if we change columns, it's going to have to go back up. The left position is going to move from left to right. The bottom position, that's going to help us position our buttons at the bottom, and it's also going to help us identify the entire height of the form. I need to know the row limit, right? How many rows in a single column? What's that limit that we're setting up inside our setup screen? What is that row limit located in E4? I also need to know the column count. How many, right, columns are we going to do? And the row count, how many rows in there? Also, I want to know the active row. What's the current selected row that we've selected, and what column? As we move through all the columns in a single row, we need to loop through those columns. I also want to know the detail row. What is the detail row? That detail row is located right here. Is it the customer detail row or the invoice, right? It's going to be, in this case, 5 or 6, but if you have a lot of tables, it goes down here. So we're only dealing with those 2 rows right here. The header row, what's in the header row? We're going to need to pull those labels. When I create them, those labels are going to be dynamic. Notice that these labels here, customer, phone, email address, city, state, zip, notes, picture, those are going to come directly from our header. So I need to know what row we have our header on as we extract those values directly from the header. All right, so we've got the header row, and also we want the data column, right, as we move through, and the start column and the end column, right? I need to know as we move through the columns where we're going to be starting, because we're looping through those columns. I need to know the linked ID is a column. What column is that linked ID located on? The last row, we're going to need that because we're going to run advanced filters. If I want to know all the invoices for a single customer, I need to know the last row of the data. We're going to run that advanced filter based on some criteria. We want to get the results of that and get that last results row so that we can bring that over. So when I select a customer here, it is that information that gets displayed inside our list box right here. So we have that here, and then we want the last column, last results row, last result column, and last data column, right? I need to know the last results. And I want those results put into a range. That list box results, I want to put it into range. This range, result range, is going to do just that. Okay, so that's it for the dimensions. Now we can focus on actually building it up. So the first thing, we're going to focus on the active sheet. We're going to get that sheet name, and we're going to put it into a variable. So whatever that sheet name, whether it's customers or invoices, it's going to go in that variable. I want to make sure that they're not on setup screen, right? If for some reason this macro is running while they're on the setup screen, just let them know that this has to be run on one of the other, something other than the setup sheet, and we're going to exit out the sub. I want to put that active row inside a variable. That's going to be the active cell row. I also want to know, well, probably not for this training, the active column. I don't think that's going to be helpful. I'm going to comment that out. I don't think we need that, but I'll move on. We needed this for the other training. This is not so important because we're going to loop through all the columns. So the detail row is very, very important. What I want to do is I want to take this sheet name and I want to find it. Where is that found inside the setup screen? We're going to pull up all the information. I need to know where the header row is. I need to know what column we're starting on. I need to know what column we're finishing on. So the row of this detail is very important. What row is it customer? So I'm going to look for that sheet name here inside all of these things. I'm going to find what row using the find command. I'm going to find what row. If it's invoices, it's going to be row 6. If it's customers, it's going to be row 5. So we can put that into a variable called detail row. And to extract that, we're going to use the setup range G5 through G34. Notice that that's all here. All the way down here, we're going to go all the way to 34 and just basically look for that sheet and extract that using the find column. And then we're going to base it on the sheet name. We want the values and we want the row. I want to extract that row. Once I put that row, I'm going to put that into a variable. If for some reason it's 0, please let the user know that this sheet is not inside, right? If they're on another sheet and they try to use it, to please add that sheet inside here, right? They may need to add that new sheet. Maybe they want to put invoice items or something inside this table. Make sure that it is found. It has to be found. Once we know it's found, then what we can do is we can set some information. First of all, I want to know the row limit. Remember, we put that in E4. That's the limit of our rows right here, located in E4. That's the number of rows we have per column, right? If we set that to just 3 rows, if I set it to 3, we're going to get a very long form, which is fine. And so you'll see here we've got a very long, way too long form, but you get the idea. It's perfectly dynamic. You wouldn't want to do that, but you can. So put it back to 5. So this is our row limit. I need to know the row limit, so it's a limit number of rows inside. So we set it back to 5 so we can count exactly 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we have 4 and then 5 here. All right, so we have that limit here, and now what we want to do is we want the header row, the start column, and the ending column are all required. So we want to get that. If making sure that we want to extract all of that inside a variable. So we're going to be looking for that header row, the start column, and the end column, making sure that H, I, and J of that detail row contains values. So we can do that here. If the detail row, H in the detail row is empty, or I or J in the detail row, if any of those are empty, let the user know to make sure they put in that information and exiting out of the sub. Once we know that they have those, we can put those into variables. The header row, the start column, and the end column all go into variables. I also want to know the background picture of that form, and I put that into a named range called form backpic in the setup screen. So when you look here inside the setup screen, we see that we have a named range called form back picture. It is that we're going to put that. Of course, we can browse for that as well. All right, so continuing on, we have that inside a string variable. It's going to be that full file path of that picture. What I do want to do is I want to check if the directory of the back picture is empty, meaning it's not found, or maybe just the variable is blank in itself. If that is the case, then what I'm going to do is set the setup then, and I also want to make sure that if K does not equal empty, we want the picture file name. So let's go over that again. If for some reason this is an inaccurate picture path, then what I want to do is I want to clear this variable. All right, good. Now what we want to do is we want to focus on K. So let's call this the picture path. This is going to be the picture path for our picture file. Now, K is where we're going to have a picture. If we decide we're going to have pictures inside our, notice that where is that picture located? Here. We're going to find that, and I want to know, okay, if it's found, then I want to check L. Is L an accurate folder, right? So we can do that here. If K does not equal empty, then we have set up. Then what we're going to do is we're going to set the picture field to whatever's in K, and I also want to set the L. I want to check L, setup. L is going to be that picture folder. So the picture folder is going to equal setup and L. So that we're placing the picture file name, right? That at least the picture field name. What we have the field name. This should be field, not file. Field, a little bit more specific. Field name there, and we have the picture folder. And we're adding a backslash onto that folder. And then all we need to do is add the picture file name to this, and then we've completed a full file path. Great. So what we want to do now is we want to set the initial left and this initial top positions, right? On our user form, we want to set that left position to 10, a very, basically just a little bit off the border, right? So what that's going to do is when we create our first label here, that label is going to be 10 pixels off the left. Notice the customer, they're slightly off the left. I want them text pixels, and I also want to push them down. How many pixels from the top are we going to have that first? Our initial top position is going to be 30 pixels from the top of that form. Also, what I want to do is if there's any existing, remember I said we need to clear all the labels and the text boxes and the list boxes and the pictures, okay? So we want to clear everything out of the existing form. Just like we do on a sheet when we're clearing out, we want to clear everything else. So we're going to focus on this dynamic form. Dynamic form is the name of our form. That's the name of our form that we assign. If we want to assign a name, all we just need to do is double click here and go into the properties, and we see that this is the name of the form here. So once we have the name, now we're going to focus on, again, using this control, define this controls. So for each control in dot controls, meaning all the controls on that form, we're going to check. I want to know, I've assigned it specific names, and if the form contains the name. We've done the same thing with shape, but now we're doing it with our form controls. So we're going to check if the name of this form contains txt, it's greater than 0, then we're going to control remove. We're going to delete all the text boxes. We're going to check for labels. If it contains the word LBL, or the string LBL, we're going to remove the labels. And what this is going to do is going to allow us to remove everything but that header. Remember, we saw that header inside here. Notice our header here is named form header, so it doesn't follow any of those. So this will not be removed because it doesn't follow that pattern, right? The picture, if there's anything that contains PIC, those are going to be removed. And also anything that contains list box is going to be removed. We're going to remove all that. So basically at this point, we just have a blank form. Right? So we've done that. We're going to go through all that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to set those initial fields for the data column. So what I want to do now is I want to loop from our start column, whatever it is, 1 or 2 or whatever it is, all the way to our end column, in this case 10, right? I'm going to loop through that. So we're starting that, and what we're going to do is we're going to extract the header. We know the header column, the header row. Header row is located right here. So we know that. We've already put that into a variable. So the first thing what I want to do is grab the label of that. So we start our loop for the data column equals from the start column to the end column. And then what we're going to do is we want to know, is it a picture field? If it's a picture field, do something like here. If it's not a picture field, do something here. So what if it is a picture field? Well, if it's a picture field, it would be a picture field if we're on the 10th column here. This is a picture field. We know it's a picture field because J, our header, is the same as here, our picture field here. Picture, that's how we know. So we're going to match that. If the picture field name equals active sheet cells the header row in the data column, meaning this says picture and this says picture. We've defined picture field all the way up here, right up here, this picture field right here, we've defined it in K, right? So we know that there's a match. So now what we're going to do, it is a picture field, so we're going to set the picture name. We're going to put picture name to whatever's in the active sheet, the active row in the data column. This is the name of the picture. So it is, in this case, Fred, Dave, or Peter, whatever, Mary. That is the name. So all we need to do is combine that name with our picture folder to get that full file path. That's what we're going to do. If the picture name does not equal empty, then we're going to set the picture path equal to the picture folder and the picture name. We've combined the folder and the name to create the full picture path. All we need to do is check to make sure that it is an accurate path and that that picture does inside that path. If the directory picture path VB directory equals empty, that means it's inaccurate, then go to next field. We're going to skip everything and we're going to go all the way down to here, next field. Going to go to that next field. If it is accurate, then we can do the following. Set the label field equal to, I want a label for that picture. So I want to create a label and then I want to create an image. So the first thing what I want to do, what do I mean by label? Let's just take a quick look. It just says the word picture on it. Very simple. If we take a look here, it says picture here. I want that picture to show up. Whatever's inside this header right here, I want to place it into a label. So we're going to do that with the following codes. We're going to set the label field equal to controls, right? We're already in the dynamic form. We're adding a brand new control. We're going to call it, the type is going to be a forms label 1. This is the type of control that we're adding. This is the name of the control that we're going to create. We're going to call it label box. Remember, we're moving everything that says LBL, so we know it's going to be removed. We're going to call this label box, and then we're going to give it a unique, going to give it that column number. That gives it a unique name, making sure we have a nice unique name for it. Once we've done that, we've created it. Now what we need to do is simply place it. So the label field equals the top position, font size is dynamic. I'm going to make this probably dynamic. I probably should do that. Let's do that now. How do we make that font size dynamic? Let's take a look inside here. We'll add that variable up here. We'll call this font size and then as long. And what is that font size? Let's set that up because I didn't do that yet. It's kind of a nice idea. We want to put it down here. Anywhere about here is fine. It's right here, font size. And it's going to equal what? It's going to equal setup somewhere about here, setup dot range. And where is that font size dot value? Let's set that set font size. So what is that font size? What field is it located? Cell located right here. Font size E6. E6 is where it's located. So we can place that directly inside here. E6. So now we have the font size. So now we can set that font size up. If we want that to become variable, we can now change that over to down here. So where are we? We're here right here. Font size 11. So now we can paste that in right here. So now it's going to dynamic font size. Okay, let's make sure that that works and there's no issues at all here. And then we can set that up so we see now it's perfect, looks good. If we want to change it to 12 or whatever, we can do that. Okay, so that's just for the picture though. So we're setting that up. And so the first thing, I want the top position to be the top position. The width is going to be 80. We're setting a standard width for that. The font size we saw already. The left position, we're setting a specific left position here. So we have that, based on the left position, this left position will change as we add more fields. The back style, I want that back style to be transparent of that form, transparent, no color. And I want to set a specific caption. What is that caption going to be? Well, it's going to be based on that header row value. Caption is going to be the data column. Set the header label. This will set that picture text. That's it. Now we've set the picture. Now all we need to do is actually create that picture and set it up. Okay, so we can do that with an image field, right? Image field, we're also adding a control, but this time we're adding a control called forms image 1. And we're giving it a name called picture field data column. Again, we have that picture pic here. That'll be removed. We're going to make sure to include the words PIC here, that string, and we're adding the data column, giving it a unique name. This is going to create that image, but it's not going to load it with anything until we do this. Now we can focus on that. So with that image field, we're going to add a picture. Dot pictures equal. We're going to load that picture. What are we loading? We're loading the picture path, right? And we can also add more features to that. So we're going to separate it by a colon, something I haven't done before. And then we're going to add that picture alignment. It's going to equal, I want to center that picture. Another colon here, we're going to put in the size modes equal. We're going to put in the stretch, right? I want that picture stretched. So that's it. So I also want to add in the auto size equals false, giving a width and a height of 60, just giving it a square. making that top position the top position, and the left position is going to be the left position plus 65. Notice we have our label based on the left position, so we want to move it over to the right. So that left position is going to be moved over to the right. And that top position, now what I want to do is I want to increment that top position, right? I've already added the label. I've already added the picture. I want to update that top position in for the next field. Increment top position, right? For the next field, get it ready for the next field. Else, what does it mean else? Else it's not a picture file, else it's just a normal file. Let's say non-picture field. Then what we're going to do is we're going to set the label for the non-picture. Label field is going to equal, again, we're adding a label here. We're adding a label box and the data column. And now all we're going to be doing is that label field, setting that top position, setting a standard width, giving that left position, giving it that dynamic font size. I'll be updating this accordingly. Font size. The caption, again, is going to be based on whatever's in the header row. Very, very simple, relative. We're just setting that label based on whatever's in the value in that header row. And then also we have to create the actual text field, right? That actual value of the text, right? As we add things, we need to create those text files here. So how do we do that? Well, that's with a text field control. We're looking at forms textbox.1, and giving it a unique name, text box, and the data column. We add that in, gives it that unique name. Then all we need to do is simply place it and fill it in. So the text field, the value is going to be with active sheet, active row, and the data column, giving it that specific data as it loops through all the columns. We're setting the top position to being top, and of course the left position is going to be just off the left position of its label, 65 pixels to the right. We've got a width of 120, and of course a dynamic font size here. So we have that there. All right, so we got the font size there. Now what we want to do is we've got the top position. Now what I want to do, as we add this brand new field here, we've added the label, we've added the field, I want to increment the top position. But I also want to know, I want to set the bottom position, right? That bottom position, as we keep moving down, what I want to do is I want to set the lowest bottom position. I need to know, let's go ahead and take a look at this form here. As we keep moving down, what I want to do is I want to know the bottom form, like the lowest point, lowest field. This picture is the lowest field. That way I know where to place the save and cancel buttons, and I also know how high to make that form. I know where to set the height. So what's important for us, because the top position is going to come down, then the top position is going to go back up and come down again. So the top position is going to be changed. But what I want to do is I want to set a variable that's going to be the lowest. Basically, what is the lowest field? That lowest field is going to be our bottom position. That will help us. So bottom position, we're going to check that. Now, if the top position is greater than the bottom position, then the bottom position equals the top position. Basically, what we do is we want the largest possible value. As we go through all the columns, this bottom position is going to be that greatest value. It's basically going to be the lowest field, the most bottom field. That position, I want to know that. So this is going to keep that bottom position variable is going to keep track of that for us. Okay, now what I want to know is if we get to our data columns, right, the row limit, I want to know the row limit as we add it. Our row limit is going to be what? Our first row limit is going to be 5. As we move down, let's take a look at this one here. As we move down here, what happens when we get beyond 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? I need to go to the top next one, right? I want to go to 6 and then 7. So what I want to do is I want to know, are we at 5 yet? Do we equal? If we're equal to 5, then what we need to do is reset that to double. It means the next one is going to be 10. Let's see, if this field had 15 fields here, we would go down 5, then we go to 10, then we get to the 11. So I want to keep track of that limit. That limit's going to let us know when we need to start a new column. So it's going to be called, we're going to use this, the data column. If the data column is equal to the row limit, in other words, if we've reached 5 here and our row limit's 5, then, and I also want to make sure the data column doesn't equal the end column. If it's the last column, then there's nothing else to do. We don't need to start a new column if we're already on the last column. But if we're not on the last column, we do need to start a new column, right? What do we need to do to start a new column? We need to reset that top position all the way back up, right? I want to reset that top position. All of that top position is going to move down, 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 down. It's then need to go back up to the original, for this job site, we need to go back up to the original top position. And we also need to move the left position over to the right. So there's a few things we need to do. So that top position is going to be, let's go to reset original top position. And also I want to move the left position, increment the left position to the right, increment left position to the right. So for full column, right, we want to make sure that the current left position plus 210. 210 is enough pixels to accommodate both the labels and the text fields. And I also want to reset the row limit, right? We've reached the row limit, so that row limit is going to be the row limit plus whatever is in set of E14. So if the row limit was 5 before, and this is 5, that new row limit's going to be 10, so that when I get to 10, we're going to reset it to 15 and so on, however many columns you have. So it's going to keep setting it there. All right, that's how we can have dynamic rows. We can just change it. Okay, great. So now what we want to do, the last data column is going to equal to the data column, right? So I just want to make sure that we know, I want to keep track of the last data column. This may come in handy a little bit later. I'm not sure if we need that on there. So that's it. So we're looping through all the columns. Once we've done that, we've added all of our tables. So as we do that, we've basically in this one, we've added all in this 7 columns or 7 rows, whatever we have here. So we've added all that in here. But now what I want to do is I want to check, are we going to add anything else? Are we adding these invoice tables? So how do we know that? Well, here, if this is not empty, if we know we've got a linked table, then we may want to add that linked table. So in customers, we can add in that linked table here. I want to know if we're going to be adding in that linked table. So how do we know that? Well, we can check on there. So if, let's go back here, check for the linked tables. If the setup M in the detail row does not equal empty, we're looking inside the setup, we're checking for M, it contains a value, we want to make sure that we have that, and N does not equal empty, there's a linked ID here, there's a linked table here, then we know we're going to be adding that linked sheet. We're going to be adding that linked table. So we're going to set the linked sheet to whatever is located in M, and we're going to set that linked ID to whatever is located in N. So we've got those into variables. And now what I want to do is I want to locate that. I want to know where that linked data column is, right? I want to know what that column is, that linked ID. So for example, if our linked sheet is invoice and our linked ID is customer ID, when we look on invoice, where are we going to find that customer ID? We're going to find it on column 3. I want to know that column, and I want to put that column inside a variable. To extract that column, we can use this range sheet name, right? We're looking at that sheet name, header row 1 all the way through the sheet name and the end column, right? The header row starting in column 1 all the way to the last column. We're going to look for that linked ID. And if it is found, we're going to look for it. It's going to put that column, in this case 3. So now we have the linked ID. So we put that linked sheet. We want that linked sheet here, the sheet here, and we just want to make sure that we've actually found it. So the linked in, it's going to find it in our original sheet to make sure that we actually have that. Okay, so once we have that, now we're going to focus on the linked sheet, right? So if we're adding invoices for specific customers, here's our customers, and our link sheet is this invoices. So what I want to do is I want to place directly in Y3, I want to place that ID. So the last row of data of that link sheet, focus on invoices, and going to get that last row. If it's less than 3, we're going to skip all this and go to no data because we have no data. If we do have data, Y2, I'm going to place that criteria header. What is the name, that linked data column, and that header row? What is the name of that row? I want to put, basically, we're looking, we've actually found it here, this customer ID here, or inside here, either one. I want to take it and I want to place it directly in Y2. Once that criteria is here, I want to place the value in Y3. So that's what we're doing. First, we're placing the criteria inside Y2. Then we're placing the value of that inside Y3. That's going to come from the active row, the linked data column. I want to know what column it is. Actually, this find, sorry, I kind of messed up. This here, the find, right, we can find it on 2 sheets. This one right here, this sheet name, we're actually finding it here. Finding customer ID here, pulling out the number 5 and placing this 5 directly inside here. Okay, so that's all. So we're looking, we can find it here, yes, but we're actually looking inside here. So it's found on column 1. So we know that the linked ID here, and we're going to place whatever ID is located inside that column, we're going to place that directly inside here. That's going to be our criteria. So that's what we do down here. We're placing our criteria here. Once we have our criteria and our header, we can then run our advanced filter. So we're going to start it out at column A in the header row through all the way through X in the last row. Right? If you have larger data, I'm assuming data ends at, let's say, X, right? But remember, you want to then increase this and reset your data. If you have a large data set, change this to different things. But for our purposes in training, we just set it for simple data. So we're going to go all the way to X as the potential data. Potential data goes only to X, because our criteria is going to go in Y, so we kind of run out of space. So potential data goes to X. Our criteria is in Y2 through Y3. Our results are going to come to A2 through AX2. Again, our potential results are going A2 through AX2. Make sure these headers match, right? Now we can include blanks, fine. Blanks is okay, as long as we have blanks here too, right? So make sure we have those. So our results are going to start in A and go all the way to AX, but it's just blanks. So that's okay too. So that's where our results are going to come. Now what we do is we want to check for the last results row. Our last results row is going to be based on whatever's in column AA. That's going to get us the last results row. So in this case, our last results row are 8. So we're going to check to make sure if those last results row are less than 3, we're going to skip and go to no data, right? There's no data here. If there is data, what I want to do is I want to get the last results column. I want to know what column this is, how many columns over. So this is 5 columns of data. I want to know that column. This is AE, that last column. To get that last column of data, we can use dot range A72 and to the left column, last column of results. So it's very dynamic, right? We're putting these into variables. So now we have the last result column. We know it's in first array. So I want to set the results. I want to put that into a range. This is a range. That result range is a range. I want to take all those results and I want to put them into a range all the way from AA3 all the way through AE. So starting on cells, right? We're already focused on the link sheet. So cells, row 3, this is our first row of data, all the way to potentially 27 here. 27 is our first column of data. AA is 27. So our first column is 27. Our last column is dynamic. So we're going to put that in here. So that means that both for invoices and then invoice items, the same thing. Notice our criteria is also in Y. Our first results are always in A. So we've kept consistency with our data. So we have that. So we know the last row. So what I want to do is I want to then put that results into a range. So our starting cell is here. Range 3, row 3, column 27. Our last one is the last results row and our last results column. This is going to set our results in a range. Now we have that range. The range is going to be very helpful. I want to give that name a range a name. So the result range dot name is called linked table. We're giving it a specific name for that range so we can refer to that. Now what I want to do is I want to know how many columns. How many columns of our results? So it's simply the last result column minus 26. This is going to get us the number of columns in our result table. This will help us when we build that list box. I also want to know the row count. The row count is basically equal to the last results row minus 1. I want to know the number of rows of data. So if the row count is greater than 50, then the row count equals 50. Basically, we're setting just a limit. We're setting a limit. You can set your own limits, but what we don't want is I want to set that dynamic, that list box. I want that to show only the results. So we're just setting a limit of all the data, all the possible data. But keep that in mind that you may want to increase or decrease your own limits. I've set it to 50. So if the row count, the total results row, is greater than 50, then set the row count to 50. All this is going to help us build that list box. Now we've got all the data in our results and we're ready to build that list box. So create that list box. The first thing we want to do is set the list box, already mentioned, as controls based on our form. We're adding a list box called form.listbox.1, and we're giving it a name called list box. Remember, we're removing any names called list box right here. So we've already removed it here from any previous creations. Once we then create it, then what we want to do is then set the top position. So if the top position it does not equal 30, that means it's not at the top, right? Then the left position equals, basically this is going to add the left position unless it's a new column, right? So what I want to do is I want to make sure that that list box is always at the top, right? I want to put it, so with the left position, so I want to make sure it's always at the top, and I want to make sure it's always moved over to the next available column, whatever that column is. So if the top position does not equal 30, then the left position equals the left position plus 210. We're adding the left position unless it's already a new column. If we've already added a new column, if it's already a new column, why would it already be a new column? Let's take a look inside our customers here. Let's say we had invoices and we've exactly have our column. Let's say our column limit here was 5 and we have 10 fields. So we're going to add 5 here, we're going to add 5 here, and then it's exactly the next field is automatically. So we know that the top would be 30 already. We're already on a new column. So it just checks to make sure we're on a new column. Now we can focus on that list box. The row source, what is the source of the data? It's going to be that named range that we just created up here, the one where we said set name range up here. Now we're ready to result. Here's the name that we set. Now what we're going to do is going to create that row source. This is our data source of the list box, data source. Okay, we also want to know the column count. How many columns do we have? Column count is going to be equal to the number of columns, So how many columns are we going to put in that list box? It's going to be based on our column count. Do we want to show those column headers? Yes, true. That's the row before, so we're going to show. What column widths are we going to find? Now, what I want to do is a column width. I want to set a default width. Now, the column widths are basically a string of variables. How many? It's like, it looks something like this: 70 point, 70 point, 70 point. But all we need to do is really add the 70. How many times do I want to add the 70 in the semicolon? I want to add it basically the number of columns. We can use the repeat function in Excel to do that. I want to repeat 70 in column for every single column count. So this repeats, let's see, repeats column pixel for number of columns. So that way every column is going to be the same. They're all going to be set to 70. And then the column widths, what are the widths of the column? Okay, so basically the column, put this into a string variable. Once I have that string variable, I'm going to put it right in here. And actually we don't have the points, so it's going to look like this. Without the points would work too, but I found out it works without the points. So it looks something like this: 70, 70, 70. It just keeps going on. So that's how we set all the column widths to 70. Then what I want to do is I want to set the font size. I'm going to set this a little bit under. We could do font size -2 or something like that. Font, because I want it a little bit smaller. Font size -2. That might work too, if you want to make it dynamic. And then we want to set the height. What is the height? It's going to be based on the row count times 12. 12 is basically the font and the row size. That's going to set a dynamic height for our list box that is exactly the number of rows. 12 is basically the number, the size that I've determined, played with a little bit and figured out 12 is the right one. The number of rows, count how many rows times 12, it's going to get us that exact height. The left position of that list box is going to be simply the left position. And the top, we're going to set the initial top. I want to reset the initial. Now the top is going to equal to 40, right? That top position is going to equal to 40. Why is it 40 and not 30? Well, the top is because I want to put in a little bit of title there above that. So now what we're going to do, this is kind of a strange thing. This list box took a little bit of, like a split second to build. If I don't put in a weight now, the width won't be reset. The width was basically it was just kind of defaulting, but I noticed that if I waited just a little bit and allowed time to build, it would just be perfect. So we're going to put in a little wait now, 1 second, and now that's going to set the width properly. So what is the width of that? It's going to be based on the number of columns. It's going to be 75 times the number of columns. We don't need this. So that's going to set the width. So we've got the width, the height, everything. And the left position, now what I want to do is I want to increase the left position. If we have to do that, the left position is now the left position plus the width minus 180. This increases the left position of the list box. And this is really important because we're going to eventually set the entire width of the form. What is the entire form width? So the best way to do is use whatever this left position is going to help us set the entire width of the form, a little bit down in the code. And also what I want to set the width is going to equal to, so we did this already. I did it twice just in case it wasn't working. We only need it once. That's it. Fair enough. Okay, so let's check that and make sure we're all working good. We set up. So let me just show you what happened. Let's see if it comes up. So, because it's kind of interesting, strange, a little bit frustrating, but so I'm going to comment out this. Let's take a look, see if it works. Sometimes it would and sometimes it didn't. So look at this. You see that? Isn't that strange? This width of this list box wasn't proper, right? It's kind of weird, huh? Maybe one of you smart people can tell me why this happens. Why is it that a wait now? Maybe it needs time to build. I don't know, but the code is exactly the same, right? But the width is not being set, even though the width property is set. But as soon as I add just a split second of time for that, it works just perfectly. So sometimes you got to experiment. You got to get creative here. And we have to know, and how did I figure that out? How did I know that? Well, what I did, I was having that problem and I just stopped the code. So I would stop the code here and I'd use F8 and step. And every time I stopped the code and I would go F8, it would work perfect. So how is it that it can can work perfect when you're stepping through the code, but it doesn't work perfect when you run it. Well, usually that's a time issue, right? That means something's happening too fast. So if I put in that little wait now, I noticed it worked perfect. So that's how I got to the assumption that a little bit of extra time could help. So you see it works. Great. So now what we want to do is I want to add a list box title. Notice that there's a title up on top of that list box called invoice items. So I want to put that title right above. That's why we're setting this at 40 and not 30, because I want that title to go a little bit above it. So we're going to add that list box title. So we need a label for that. So we're going to set that label, controls, we're going to add that forms label 1. We're going to call it label list box. Again, it has that LBL so it can be removed. And with the label, I want to set the top just above 20. 30 is usually our top position. We're going to set this one a little bit higher to 20. The width is going to be the same width of the list box, right? Exactly the same. The left position is going to be exactly the left position of the width. So we're setting the width and the left exactly. And we're going to text, I want it in the center. So this is going to be centered directly above that list box. I'm going to give it a bold font. We can do font. We can do this font size +1 font. So make it dynamic size +1 if you want to. And then the font size, and then the caption. What is the caption is going to be based on that linked sheet? What is the value? Set that header label. Basically, we're just going to put whatever's in here. So, whatever's in your customers, customer invoices, or whatever we have here, you're going to put that in. So this would be invoice items, or so whatever the title of this that you put, it's going to list that title there. So that's going to be the title. Okay, great. So we've created our list box, we've created our title, we've added in all of our labels and all of our data. All that's left is add the form. Now we just need to build that form accordingly, put the size, put the background, and all that. So here's all of our form details for the form specific. All the contents of the form are now complete. First thing what I want to do is add a caption. This is the active sheet name. Now what is the caption of that form? If we click on one of the data files here, we can see that the caption is that upper, it says customers right here, customers up here. This is the header, this is the caption right here. So we want to give that form a caption. I'm going to give it the same. It's going to be the active sheet name. And I want to set the original startup position equal to 0. This is the start position of that form. No initial settings specified. Forms can have middle, center, upper, lower, but I want to set this one to 0. This form, very important. This is where this is the code that I got off that website right here. This little bit and this. So basically this question on Stack Overflow, they got it from somewhere else, some French website they said. And basically very, very helpful. So it's going to turn basically pixels, here points to screen pixels. And the first thing we need to do is determine how many points are there. So there says 1 inch is going to be about 72 points, usually around 96 to 120 dpi. So we want to set that initial X position. What is that leftmost horizontal position of the screen? It's very important because if it's minimized or the screen size, it's all dynamic based on the different user screen. So this is going to basically get the device, get that left position and divide it by 72 based on the number of pixels there, number of points in a width, in an inch. So this is going to set up the leftmost position. We're going to do the same thing with the vertical position, that top portion, and we're going to put that into a variable called Y position. And that's going to set that upper vertical screen position, right? That upper vertical. Then all we need to do is measure. So basically it's going to get that upper left portion here. So once we do that, then we need to just differentiate between that selected. I want that thing to put just 1 point over to the right. So notice it's always going to be on the left. But I also wanted the top position to be right under the selected cell. So I've got to measure the difference between that top portion and the top of the screen. So that's the differentiator on that. So to do that, that left position is basically going to be the active window, points to screen pixels, X, 1, what does that 1 means? I want that 1 pixel on the left, right? The left position is simply going to be 1. There's no column. If you wanted it based on the active column, you could put active cell column or active cell left would be okay. But I just wanted 1 pixel. In other words, I want it all the way on the left. And we're going to multiply that times the X position. So basically this is going to stay as 1 and multiply that times 1 and then divide it by X position. And that's going to set that left position. I just have it default to the first column. However, the top position, I want it to default based on the selected row. So this is where the top position, again, same thing here. This time the active cell top, this here, right here, is where we get the top position of the active cell. This right here will determine it. When we multiply that times the y position times y and then divide it by y position, please don't ask me to detail that because I'm not that smart. Something like that. So basically it's just differentiate. What this formula does is it differentiates between the top position of this and the top position of the screen. So the measurement between those two is where we get the top position of the form. So that's basically all it's doing. The top position of the screen to the top position, we need to get the dimensions for that. How it works, beyond me. But it works fantastic. So that's all I'm happy about. And so basically what we do, I also want to add to the active cell height. This will be one row down, right? I don't want it on the exact row that we've selected. I want it one row down. That's why we're adding the active cell height. So now that we have that, we've set the exact left position, we've set the exact top position. Now all we need to do is set the width and the height of our form. To do that, I want to make sure if the top position does not equal 30, then the left position equals left. Basically, we want to add the left position. I want to add additional if it's not already a new column. Basically, we just want to increase it to make sure. We're going to set that height of that form to the bottom position. Remember that bottom position, very important, plus 70. I need to add additional pixels because I want to have space for both the save and the cancel button. If the left position is less, I also want to set a minimum width. What is the minimum width, right? If we just have one column, I need to have room for the save and cancel. So we do have to have a minimum width. So if the left position is less than 300, then set the width to 300, setting that minimum. Otherwise, set the width of that form based on that left position. That's why that left position was so important that we keep updating it. That's why when we add that list box, we increase that left position because that left position that's going to determine the width of that form. Okay, so now what we want to do is to set that form header. The form header is one of the few items that we already have. We don't have to create that, and the name of that is called form header. So that's one of the few things that we have. And so with that, we're already created it. So dot form header, it's already created. We're putting a caption. It's going to be the same as the active sheet name. I want the back styles transparent. The left is going to be the dynamic form left, and I want the width to be the form, the entire width of the form, and the text align here to the left. So we're just assigning it to the left, and then it'll add a little pixels onto that. Great. So now we've created the form, we've sized the form. Now we just need to position the save and the cancel buttons. The save and the cancel have already also been created, and that's named basically save button, and it's called cancel button. So with those, we can now set those up accordingly. So the save button, the left position of that's going to be the width of the entire form divided by 2, right? That's our center mark of the form. But I want to move it over a little bit to the left, minus 130. So I want them centered in the form. This is the center, but obviously I have 2 buttons, so I don't want it exactly in the middle, so I want to bring it a little bit to the left. The save button, what is about the top position of the save button? The top position is going to be that based on that bottom position plus 10, right? So we want to create that bottom position because our form, of course, the height of the form is bottom position plus 70, but I don't want them that far down, so bottom position plus 10. The cancel button is also going to be based on the entire width of the form divided by 2, but this time we're adding 60 because we want that cancel button to the right. It's going to have the exact same top position as the save button do based on the bottom position plus 10. So this is going to set both the width and the top position of the left, it's going to set the left and the top position of the save button and the left and the top position of the cancel button. Now what we want to do is we want to add that background picture if it's available. If the back picture does not equal empty, then what we're going to do is we're going to do picture. We're going to load that picture, dot picture, because we're already inside the forms, right? We're already in that form, that dynamic form. We're going to load a picture based on the back picture. And then I want to set 2 different properties for that picture. I want to set that alignment to be center, right? Picture alignment to be the center alignment. And I want to stretch that picture. I want to use the stretcher size mode. That's it. That's all we have to do to set that picture. So now what we want to do is I just want to put the focus on the first field. When I load a field, I want to make sure that that first field gets loaded, right? So notice that first field gets the tab. I want to set the focus on that first field so they can tab through it. Los Angeles, there's no city here. Let's add a city. Okay, and save that. Okay, so now we have Los Angeles, so that works. Just if we select it again, it's there. Okay, so we're going to set that position there. So let's continue back on with the code here inside there. So all we've done here is set the focus to that first field. So basically that text box. And what is that first field? It's whatever that start column is. So we can refer to the first field that we created here based on the start column. We're going to set the focus of that. Sets the focus onto the first field. The last thing to do is show the form. Show that form. Display that form. It's about show form. That is it. That's all we have to do. We don't need application. I can get rid of that. Not necessary. All right. Very, very cool. So now all we need to do is quick this. We don't need here. Clear the contents of this. Shapes. This is old. We don't need this. And we don't need this super simple text. That's it. So that's how we create it. But how do we actually save the data, right? Notice that I did it a few times. When I click the save button, it saves any changes that we had. So how do we do that? Well, and also cancel. So let's take a look inside the dynamic form, and we can view the code inside. Very simple. The cancel button is going to do what? The cancel button, when clicked, is going to hide that form, and it's going to unload all the data in that form with just those two. The save button is going to do something. It's going to run a macro called save data. It's going to hide the form, and then it's going to unload the form. So it is this macro save data, relatively simple, that's located inside this module, and it's the last and final macro that we're going to go over, relatively simple one. So I need to know the active row, and I also need to know the data column, the detail row, the start column, the end column, just as we did before, text field as MS Form text box, and control as control. So the sheet name is going to be a string. We also want to put that into a variable. Okay, so if the setup, right, I want to make sure that we actually have a value in E5. What is going to be E5? Of course, E5 is going to be located in that selected row. Without the selected row, I don't know what data to save. That selected row, very important based on the row that we've selected. Okay, once we have that, I also want to know the sheet name is going to be based on the active sheet name. And the active row, what is the active row that they've selected? That's the selected row. It's going to be based on the active cell row. Also going to be set up here, sheet 5. That's fine too. Either one is fine. So on a resume next, in case we have that, the detail row is going to be, again, we're going to look for that sheet name. We're going to find it. This way, if it's not found, we can escape out of there. If that detail row, if it's not found, please make sure to set this up dynamic. That means that sheet name, again, that sheet name is not found here. So we need that sheet name here. If it's not found, we can then exit out of the sub. Okay, we're going to set that start column also based on I in the detail row and the end column based on J, right? I need to extract those values. I need to know what that start column is, and I need to know what that end column is because I've got a loop all the way from 2 to 10, saving that data. Any changes to that data should be saved to the table. So we can do that. So if the start column equals 0 or the end column equals 0, please let the user know to add both the start. Just letting them know we need both start column and the end column. Now the rest is super simple. For the data column, we're setting this is our variable data column equals the start column to the end column. So we're looping through all the columns. And all I want to do is check based on the fields. That's where our unique fields are going to come in handy, right? If it's not found, why would it not be found? On error, go to next. If it's a picture field would be different. So there could be an error here if it's not found, right? Text box data column 10, it doesn't exist. 10's a picture. So this would create an error. So we're just going to skip to next column if there's an error. So all I want to do is check to see if there's a change. If the value of that text box is different than the value of this data, then make the change, right? So example, if I make a change here and I change this to city, Mobile, let's just say Atlanta, right? It's different there. So then we know that this mobile and Atlanta are different, so we could save those changes because we're saving them. So we're going to check for that first. And so how do we do that? Well, we use an if statement. If sheet names, cells, the active row, the data column value is different than the text field value. The value of that text field, if they're different, then we make the change. Then sheets, cells, active row, data column value equals the text field. Make the update if it's different. And then we're just going to loop through every column. That is it. That's all we have to do. Very, very cool. This was a quicker training, but a very, very powerful training. I'd love to see how you can use these. Let me know what ideas you have. I'll be adding more to Patreon for sure, and that'll be coming up in just a week. So let me know what you got on there. If you're not on Patreon, please go ahead and sign up. It's a fantastic platform. Tons of great stuff going on. I answer all questions. And we've got posts all the time, new content, old content, PDF code books, early discounts, and tons of great things. Thank you so much for joining us. This automatic, dynamic user forms, how you can create for any table. Amazing training. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.